Why are you here right now instead of endlessly scrolling through short videos or binge watching something you'll probably forget tomorrow? That question matters more than you realize. The fact that you're even listening to this, reading this, giving your attention to something that isn't about cheap distraction already tells me something about you that's rare. Most people choose noise. You chose signal. That choice says more about your mind than any test score or resume ever could. Because here's the truth. Life is full of people who see problems and immediately start listing excuses. It's too hard, too expensive, too risky, too time-consuming. You've probably heard all of those phrases. Maybe you've even said some of them yourself when you were tired or frustrated. But the reality is that most people make excuses their default operating system. They approach every challenge with a mindset that is preloaded for failure. The minute something looks complicated, they're already running the script. It can't be done. Someone else should deal with it. Maybe it's not even worth trying. And then there's you. You're not running that script. You wouldn't even be here if you were. Something in your brain is wired a little differently. Instead of immediately asking why not, you ask, what if? That tiny difference in the way you approach problems is like a small change in rocket trajectory. At launch, a degree or two looks trivial, but a few thousand miles later, you end up on a completely different planet. That's why I want to start here, with this simple observation. The fact that you're engaging with this conversation means you're already on a trajectory that most people will never choose. When people look at me and ask how Tesla happened or how SpaceX built reusable rockets when everybody said it was impossible, they often expect some complicated formula. They think I'm going to reveal some secret algorithm for success or a genius hack. But the reality is a lot simpler. And it starts with exactly the mindset you're showing right now. It's the willingness to look at a problem and think, well, maybe it's not impossible. Maybe it just hasn't been solved yet. That shift changes everything. Most people never make it. They get stuck in fear, in the weight of conventional wisdom, in the comfort of letting someone else try. You're here, which means you're at least curious about what might be possible beyond the limits you've been told to accept. That curiosity is the seed. It doesn't look like much at first, but it's the one thing that separates the people who build the future from the people who complain about it. Think about it. Every big leap humanity has ever made started with someone who refused to accept the default answer. Fire, flight, electricity, space travel, it all started with curiosity about solutions, not surrender to obstacles. If you had asked the average person 1,000 years ago if humans would ever fly, they would have laughed. If you had asked the average person 200 years ago if we'd land on the moon, they'd probably have told you to stop reading fantasy. The average person doesn't believe until it's already happened. But innovators don't wait for permission from reality. They try. They fail. They try again. They keep pushing until the impossible looks obvious in hindsight, and that's exactly what I see in you. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying you're automatically going to build rockets or electric cars or brain-computer interfaces. You don't have to. The point isn't about what industry you're in. The point is about how your mind works when it encounters problems. Do you shrink away, or do you lean in? From the fact that you're here, I know you lean in. You don't ignore complexity, you're curious about it. You don't dismiss hard problems, you wonder what would happen if someone tried a different approach. You don't just accept the world as it is, you ask if maybe, just maybe, it could be different. That quality is rare. In fact, it's rarer than intelligence, rarer than formal education, rarer than talent, because you can find plenty of smart people who are paralyzed by doubt, who use their intelligence to explain all the reasons something won't work. They sound clever while doing nothing. And you can find plenty of talented people who waste their abilities because they never believed they should try something hard. But someone who is willing to push against impossible problems, that's a much shorter list. And I'm telling you right now, you're on it. I don't know your background, your income, your family story, or your personal challenges. I don't need to. What I know from the simple fact that you're here is that you've already made choices that separate you from the crowd. You didn't settle for entertainment. You didn't settle for easy. You didn't settle for, that's just the way things are. You chose to step into a conversation about ideas, about solving problems, about pushing against the boundaries of what seems achievable. That's not normal behavior. And that's good. Because normal isn't what builds rockets. Normal isn't what shifts industries. Normal isn't what changes the trajectory of human civilization. Normal keeps people stuck. Different moves the needle. You're here because something inside you is already different. So in this first part of our conversation, I want you to recognize that. Don't underestimate what this small decision says about you. The biggest breakthroughs often start with tiny steps that don't look impressive at the time. Clicking a link, listening to an idea, asking a question, those actions might seem insignificant, but they're signals. They're indicators of how your mind is tuned. And when you add up enough of those signals over time, they become the difference between someone who drifts through life and someone who builds something extraordinary. Now, maybe you're skeptical. Maybe you're thinking, this is just words. How does showing up here prove anything? Fair point. But think about probability. The probability that a random person would choose this over distraction is low. The probability that someone curious about real solutions would make that choice is high. Which side of that equation do you think you're on? Exactly, this isn't about me flattering you, it's about data. Choices are data points. The fact that you're here is one of them, and the pattern it reveals is that you're not wired like the majority. You're curious about solutions. That doesn't guarantee success. Nothing does. But it dramatically increases the odds. Because the hardest part of doing big things isn't intelligence, it's mindset. The rocket equation doesn't change because you believe in it. Gravity doesn't bend to positive thinking. But your willingness to confront hard problems, to stay curious, to keep searching for solutions, that's the fuel. Without it, nothing gets off the ground. With it, even the most impossible ideas suddenly start to look like engineering challenges waiting for the right approach. So that's where we start. You're here. That matters. More than you probably realize. It tells me something about you that statistics can't capture and market research will never measure. It tells me you've already taken the first step toward being someone who doesn't just consume the world as it is, but helps shape it into what it could be. And if you stay on this trajectory, if you keep choosing curiosity over excuses, then a few thousand miles down the line you'll end up in a place most people can't even imagine. That's why you're here. And that's why this matters. I want to tell you something that might sound strange at first. I know something about you that nobody else does. Not because I've collected data on you, not because I've been studying your habits, not because I have access to some secret file with your name on it. I know it because I've learned to recognize patterns in people, and the pattern you've already shown is rare. When you showed up here, when you decided to invest time and energy into a conversation about ideas instead of choosing the easy path of distraction, you revealed more than you probably realize about how your mind works. People assume that successful individuals, whether in business, science, or art, know things about others mainly through research, statistics, or numbers on a spreadsheet. And yes, data is useful. I use it every day, but the most important things I know about people, the things that determine whether they end up building something extraordinary or just following the script of an ordinary life, aren't about data points. They're about qualities that most people don't even see in themselves. That's what I know about you. You have a quality that's invisible to the majority, even to yourself sometimes, and yet it's the single biggest predictor of whether you're going to create something meaningful with your life. That quality is not intelligence. I've met people far smarter than me who never did anything significant because their intelligence was paralyzed by fear. It's not education either. Some of the most impressive degrees sit on the walls of people who have settled for mediocrity. It's not even talent. Talent is useful, but I've seen plenty of talented people waste theirs. The quality I'm talking about is much rarer. It's a mental habit, almost a reflex. When you see a challenge, your first instinct is to think about how it could be solved instead of why it can't. Most people, when they face a problem, immediately shift into obstacle mode. They start listing reasons why the challenge is too big, too complex, too expensive, or simply impossible. You're wired differently. Your reflex is curiosity about solutions. That's what I know about you. Think about it this way. When I started SpaceX, almost every expert I spoke to told me reusable rockets were a fantasy. They pointed to decades of failed attempts, billions of dollars wasted, and endless reasons why it couldn't be done. If I had listened to them, SpaceX wouldn't exist. But my instinct wasn't to ask why it wouldn't work. It was to ask what assumptions had been wrong in the past and how we might try a new approach. That instinct curiosity instead of resignation is exactly what I see in you. You wouldn't be here if you didn't have at least a trace of it. The fact that you've leaned into this conversation instead of avoiding it is already a signal. Now, you might not believe me. You might think, how can he know that about me without even meeting me? Fair question. But here's the thing. When you know what to look for, the signal is obvious. The people who choose to engage with ideas like this are the ones who are already wired to search for solutions. The people who aren't wired that way, never even make it this far. They never click, never read, never listen, never step outside the comfort zone of entertainment. So yes, I can say with confidence that I know this about you. You may not see it yet, but I do. Let me give you an example outside of rockets and cars, something simpler. Imagine two people standing in front of a locked door. The first person stares at the lock and thinks, well, that's it. I can't go through. End of story. The second person stares at the same lock and thinks, there must be a key somewhere, or maybe I can design a better lock. Or maybe the door isn't the only way in. Same obstacle, different instinct. That second instinct is what changes lives, and it's what I see in you. This is not about optimism or blind positivity. I'm not saying you ignore reality or pretend problems aren't real. Quite the opposite. People who are wired for solutions stare directly at reality. They see the lock. They acknowledge it's solid, heavy, complicated. But instead of stopping there, they start thinking about what hasn't been tried yet. That's the shift. That's the rare quality. And that's what I know you have. You might think this is small, but it isn't. This quality, this reflex, is the foundation of every extraordinary life I've ever seen. It doesn't matter whether someone is building rockets, running a business, raising a family, or trying to change their community. The ones who make a difference are always the ones who look at problems and think about solutions. Everyone else talks about obstacles. They calculate why it can't be done. They protect themselves from disappointment by lowering their expectations. They convince themselves that mediocrity is safer than risk. But people like you see things differently. And when you apply that reflex consistently, when you don't just use it occasionally, but build it into the way you approach every challenge, it changes everything. Years ago, when Tesla was on the edge of collapse, when we were days away from running out of cash, almost everyone around me was saying it was over. The safe move was to shut it down, salvage what was left, and walk away. But I couldn't. My brain wouldn't let me. I kept asking, what if we try one more adjustment, one more redesign, one more launch? That refusal to accept the default ending, that curiosity about what might work instead, is the only reason Tesla exists today. It wasn't genius. It wasn't luck. It was a stubborn reflex. Don't stop at obstacles. Keep looking for solutions. That's the exact same reflex I see in you. And here's the catch. Most people who have this quality don't recognize it in themselves. They don't see how rare it is. They think everybody thinks this way, but they don't. You might not even realize how valuable this instinct is, how it sets you apart from the majority. That's why I want to make it explicit. I know this about you. You have the ability to approach problems differently, and that means you have the ability to create outcomes that most people can't. Of course, knowing isn't enough. You have to use it. You have to strengthen it, apply it, practice it, and build your life around it. But before you can do any of that, you have to see it clearly. You have to recognize that it's already there inside you. That's why I'm telling you this now, because if you never see it, you'll never use it. And if you never use it, you'll never know what was possible. So here's what I want you to take from this part of the conversation. I know something about you that maybe nobody else has told you, not because they couldn't see it, but because they weren't paying attention. You have a rare reflex. When you face challenges, your instinct is not to shut down, but to start thinking about how. That quality, when you choose to lean into it, can change your entire trajectory. It's not about talent, not about IQ, not about luck. It's about mindset. And your mindset is already different. That's what I know about you. The rare quality I'm talking about is not intelligence, not education, not luck, and not even raw talent. Those things are useful, but they are not decisive. What really makes the difference between someone who creates something extraordinary and someone who just accepts whatever life hands them is a very specific mental reflex. It's the instinct to ask how a problem might be solved instead of why it can't. That's it. It sounds simple, almost too simple, but it is the single most important trait I've ever observed in people who actually change the world. I've seen brilliant engineers who couldn't move past obstacles because their intelligence was spent calculating reasons for failure. I've seen graduates from the best schools who froze at the first sign of risk because their education taught them to play it safe. I've seen people dripping with talent but paralyzed by the fear of embarrassment if they tried and failed. And I've seen people with none of those advantages, average grades, average backgrounds, average resources, go on to do extraordinary things simply because they had this rare quality. When they faced a challenge, their minds lit up with curiosity about solutions. They treated constraints like puzzles instead of walls. That is what I mean by rare. Most people don't even realize how unusual it is to think this way. They assume it's normal to wonder how things might work, but it's not. The default human response to hard problems is avoidance. Look at history. For thousands of years, people assumed heavier than air flight was impossible. They weren't stupid. They just accepted the default. Then two bicycle mechanics named Wright refused to stop asking how. The result was flight. Same with space travel. For centuries, it was fantasy. Then engineers and scientists started asking the right questions, building rockets, running tests, pushing past failures, and eventually, we landed on the moon. People often think these moments of progress required genius beyond imagination. But genius wasn't the key. The key was curiosity that didn't shut down in the face of difficulty. The key was that rare quality. I've experienced this myself over and over. When we started Tesla, the automotive industry laughed. They said electric cars could never compete, that the batteries would always be too heavy, too expensive, too weak. Every reason was listed. But instead of focusing on why it wouldn't work, we asked how it might. How could we design a better battery? How could we scale production? How could we make an electric car not just efficient, but exciting? That mindset didn't make the challenges disappear. It made them solvable. And solvable problems eventually yield to persistence. SpaceX was the same story. Rockets had been treated as disposable for decades. Everyone assumed that was just the way it had to be. Launch once, throw it away, start over. That was the fact of rocketry, but I couldn't stop asking, how do we land it and reuse it? The first attempts failed spectacularly. Fireballs, explosions, millions lost. But the question didn't go away, and eventually, the solution emerged. Today, reusable rockets are real, and they're reshaping the economics of space. That happened because of the rare quality, not because of luck, not because of superior intelligence, because of curiosity about solutions when everyone else stopped at obstacles. What you need to understand is that this quality is rarer than people think. Intelligence is widely distributed, education is accessible to millions, talent exists in every city, every community, but the instinct to lean into problems, to treat them as solvable puzzles, that's scarce. And because it's scarce, it's powerful. It acts like a lever. A lever multiplies force. This quality multiplies whatever you already have. Maybe you're smart, maybe you're not. Maybe you have money, maybe you don't. Maybe you had a privileged start, maybe you didn't. None of that is decisive. What's decisive is whether you keep searching for solutions when the obstacles pile up. If you do, your odds of building something meaningful skyrocket compared to everyone else. Now, don't misunderstand. Having this quality doesn't mean you ignore reality. It doesn't mean you pretend limits don't exist. It means you treat limits as design parameters. Engineers don't ignore gravity. They work with it. Pilots don't ignore drag. They calculate around it. Builders don't ignore cost. They design for it. In the same way, people with this rare quality don't deny problems. They analyze them, break them down, and look for leverage points. Most people see constraints as stop signs. The rare ones see them as roadmaps. That's the difference. Let me give you a more ordinary example. Imagine someone stuck in a job they hate. The common response is resignation. This is just how life is. I need the paycheck. I can't change it. That's obstacle thinking. But someone with the rare quality asks different questions. What skills could I build while I'm here? What side project could I test after hours? What network could I grow to create options? They don't deny the constraint. The need for income is real, but they don't let it trap them. They work with it, and over time that mindset opens doors others never see. Same circumstances, different reflex, different outcome. This quality is not flashy. It doesn't get headlines on its own, but when applied consistently, it compounds. It turns tiny experiments into breakthroughs, small adjustments into revolutions, setbacks into stepping stones. Look at anyone who has ever done something significant, and you'll see this quality at work. They didn't stop at the first wall. They asked what was behind it, how it could be climbed, tunneled under, or simply removed. It sounds like stubbornness, and sometimes it is, but at its core, it's curiosity, a refusal to accept that what exists now is the final word. And here's what I want you to grasp. You have this quality. That's not speculation. You've already demonstrated it just by being here, by engaging with ideas that most people avoid. You might not fully recognize it in yourself yet, but it's there. And once you start to see it clearly, Once you start to realize how rare and valuable it is, you can strengthen it. You can use it more deliberately. And that's when everything changes. Because the rare quality doesn't just solve occasional problems, it reshapes your entire approach to life. This, more than anything else, is why I know you're capable of building something meaningful, not because of your grades or your resume or your background, because you already have the rarest lever of all, curiosity that doesn't shut down at obstacles. That is the rare quality, and if you commit to using it, it will change your life. This rare quality, the instinct to look for solutions instead of shutting down at obstacles, is like a muscle. If you use it, it gets stronger. If you neglect it, it atrophies. Most people lose it as they get older, because the world trains them to avoid risk, to stay safe, to accept limits. When you're a kid, you ask why 1,000 times a day. You see problems as puzzles. But by the time you're an adult, you've been told enough times to stop asking questions, to stop trying, to stop dreaming. That's how most people lose this quality. They trade curiosity for compliance. But here's the good news. You can strengthen it again. You can train your mind to approach problems differently, and if you do it deliberately, the effect compounds. So how do you strengthen it? The first step is to question assumptions. Every problem you face is surrounded by unspoken assumptions, invisible rules you've been taught to accept without even noticing. Start by asking, what if the opposite were true? That question alone can crack open possibilities that others miss. When we were told reusable rockets were impossible, the assumption was that rockets had to be disposable. We flipped the question, what if the opposite were true? What if rockets could land? That shift didn't magically solve the problem, but it forced us to see the challenge differently. You can do the same in your own life. Whatever problem you face, ask what assumption is holding it in place, and then imagine the opposite. The second step is to run small experiments. Don't wait for perfect answers before you try. Just test. When Tesla was struggling with production, I slept on the factory floor, not because I enjoyed it, but because it allowed me to see problems firsthand and test solutions faster. Iteration strengthens curiosity. Every failed attempt teaches you what doesn't work, and every small win builds confidence. You don't need to wait until everything is lined up. Just run experiments and let reality give you feedback. The third step is to treat constraints as design parameters. Most people see limits as stop signs. Not enough money, not enough time, not enough connections. But limits are just factors. Engineers never complain that gravity exists. They design with it in mind. The same applies to your challenges. If you don't have money, treat it as a design parameter. Ask what solutions can be created without capital. If you don't have time, ask what can be automated or cut. If you don't have connections, ask how you can create value that attracts people. Limits don't stop you if you approach them correctly. They guide you toward more creative solutions. Another way to strengthen this quality is to practice persistence deliberately. Curiosity without persistence fizzles out the moment things get tough. When SpaceX failed 3 launches in a row, almost everyone assumed it was over. But failure didn't kill curiosity. We kept asking how to make it work. That persistence led to the fourth attempt, and the rocket flew. Every time you push through difficulty instead of retreating, you strengthen the reflex. You teach your brain that problems are puzzles worth solving, not walls that can't be moved. Finally, surround yourself with people who think this way. Your environment shapes your reflexes. If everyone around you is focused on why things won't work, their mindset will infect yours. But if you're around people who treat obstacles as puzzles, that perspective becomes normal. It reinforces your instinct to keep searching. Look at any breakthrough team in history, the Wright brothers, early NASA, the first Tesla engineers, and you'll find a group that fed off each other's solution-oriented curiosity. You need that too. If you don't have it yet, seek it out. Build it. Even a small community of problem solvers can amplify your mindset. Strengthening this quality is not about motivational slogans or blind optimism. It's about daily practice. It's about deliberately training your brain to flip from excuses to experiments, from resignation to solutions. And like any training, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. At first, it feels unnatural. You'll catch yourself making excuses, listing obstacles, focusing on why not. That's normal. But each time you stop and redirect toward how, you strengthen the muscle. Over months and years, it becomes automatic. One day you wake up and realize you've rewired your brain to see problems differently. That's when life begins to shift. Because once the instinct is strong, nothing looks impossible anymore. Everything looks like a puzzle waiting for the right approach, and that's when extraordinary progress happens. You don't need to be the smartest, richest, or most talented person in the room. You just need to have the strongest reflex for solutions. And that reflex can be trained. It can be built. It can be multiplied. So start now. Question assumptions. Run experiments. Treat constraints as design parameters. Practice persistence. Surround yourself with people who feed your curiosity. Do that, and you'll strengthen the rarest and most powerful quality you already possess. And once it's strong, you can apply it anywhere to your work, your relationships, your health, your finances, because the truth is, the world doesn't reward excuses. It rewards solutions. And the stronger your solution reflex becomes, the more inevitable your success will be. Once you understand that this rare quality can be strengthened, the next step is to apply it everywhere, not just in moments of crisis or when inspiration strikes, but systematically across all areas of your life. Most people use their problem-solving curiosity sporadically. Maybe they'll apply it to a project at work or a crisis with a friend, but when it comes to their own lives, relationships, health, finances, personal growth, they accept limits as permanent. They compartmentalize curiosity, as if it only belongs in certain situations, but the truth is that this reflex, once strong, belongs everywhere. Let's start with work. Most people see their career as a fixed ladder. You climb rung after rung, waiting for permission from bosses, waiting for opportunities to appear, waiting for conditions to improve. That's obstacle thinking, disguised as tradition. A solution-oriented mindset treats careers differently. Instead of waiting for ladders, you build elevators. You look for ways to create value where others see only tasks. You experiment with side projects, new skills, different approaches. You ask questions like, what problem could I solve here that nobody else is even noticing? That's how breakthroughs happen. That's how careers transform. It's not about climbing the predefined structure. It's about redesigning the structure altogether. Now take relationships. People often treat difficulties in relationships as inevitable. That's just how marriage is. That's just how friendships drift. That's just how families fight. That's obstacle thinking applied to human connection. But what if you applied the rare quality here? Instead of accepting distance or dissatisfaction as permanent, you ask, what new way of communicating haven't we tried yet? What shared activity could reignite connection? What assumption about this conflict might be wrong? Relationships, like rockets, are complex systems. They fail when you stop iterating. They thrive when you keep experimenting with solutions. Apply curiosity here, and you'll find intimacy where others settle for distance. Health is another area where people surrender too easily. They get a diagnosis or feel a limitation and immediately accept it as permanent. That's just my metabolism. That's just aging. That's just genetics. But the truth is, health is full of solvable puzzles. Diet, exercise, sleep, treatment options, all of these are levers. A solution-oriented mindset doesn't deny the challenges but asks how to work with them. What lifestyle change could improve this condition? What new treatment could be tested? What habit could be adjusted? Many breakthroughs in personal health come not from doctors handing out easy answers but from individuals refusing to stop asking how to improve. You can be one of those individuals. Finances are another domain. Most people accept their income as fixed, their trajectory as predetermined, their opportunities as limited. They focus only on cutting costs, which is like trying to reduce drag without adding thrust, necessary but not enough. A solution mindset asks different questions. How can I create more value? How can I learn a new skill that changes the equation? How can I turn this interest into an income stream? The people who build wealth aren't the ones who merely budget better. They're the ones who innovate value, who refuse to accept that their financial reality is locked. Apply curiosity here, and money shifts from a cage to a tool. Personal development is maybe the most overlooked application. Most people accept their personality, habits, or limitations as permanent traits. I'm just not disciplined. I'm just not confident. I'm just not creative. These are obstacle scripts. But what if you applied the rare quality here? What if you asked, what practice could build discipline? What training could increase confidence? What environment could spark creativity? The same curiosity that builds rockets can rebuild habits. The same persistence that solves engineering problems can rewire personality traits. You're not stuck. You're just untrained in applying your solution reflex to yourself, and once you do, personal transformation becomes inevitable. The point is, this quality doesn't belong in a box labeled big problems only. It belongs everywhere. because every part of your life is shaped by how you respond to problems. If your instinct is to surrender, every area stagnates. If your instinct is to search for solutions, every area grows. Think about Jennifer, the single mother I mentioned earlier. She didn't just apply her solution mindset to survival, she applied it to childcare, to transportation, to building community. She didn't stop with her own problems. She expanded her curiosity outward, and in doing so, she created solutions for dozens of families. That's what happens when you apply this quality systematically. Your impact multiplies. You stop living reactively and start building proactively. You become the person others turn to when things look impossible, not because you're a genius, but because your reflex is different. And the beauty is, once you start applying it everywhere, it becomes who you are. It stops being an occasional tool and becomes your default mode of operation. Constraints stop scaring you, obstacles stop defining you, problems stop intimidating you. They become fuel. They become puzzles. They become invitations to grow. This is how extraordinary lives are built, not through bursts of luck or rare strokes of talent, but through the consistent application of a rare quality across all domains. And here's the thing most people miss. The biggest problems in your life, the ones that feel most permanent, are often the ones most vulnerable to this shift. The career you feel stuck in, the relationship you think is beyond repair, the financial situation that feels locked, the personal habits you think are unchangeable, these are not dead ends. They are unsolved puzzles. They are waiting for the right combination of curiosity, persistence, and creativity. And you have that. You've already demonstrated it. Now it's time to apply it everywhere. Because once you do, the life you thought was impossible starts to reveal itself as simply unbuilt. When you take this rare quality and strengthen it, when you begin to apply it not just sometimes but everywhere, what emerges is a different kind of future, a future you build instead of one you inherit. Most people live in futures designed by others. They accept careers shaped by corporations, communities shaped by governments, and personal lives shaped by cultural expectations. They drift into a future that was never really theirs. But when you use this reflex systematically, when you refuse to accept limits as permanent, you start to construct something different, a future that reflects your choices, your curiosity, your persistence. And the truth is, that's how every extraordinary human story has ever been written. Nobody wakes up one day and stumbles into greatness by accident. They build it brick by brick, solution by solution, moment by moment, until the life they're living looks impossible to everyone else, but obvious in hindsight. That can be your story. The difference between ordinary and extraordinary is not that one group had more opportunities, more talent, more luck. The difference is in the way they responded to problems. Ordinary people calculate why not. Extraordinary people keep asking how. And over time, that small shift compounds into a life trajectory that is radically different. Think about it. The Wright brothers didn't have more resources than the scientists who mocked them. They had the rare quality. Tesla didn't have more money than the established auto giants. We had the rare quality. SpaceX didn't have decades of legacy like NASA's contractors. We had the rare quality. And now reusable rockets exist. And electric cars dominate markets because we refuse to stop asking how. If this mindset can reshape industries, it can reshape your life. The future you build doesn't have to look like mine. It doesn't have to involve rockets or cars or brain-computer interfaces. It can be about your family, your community, your art, your health, your finances. What matters isn't the domain. What matters is the reflex. Every time you face a problem and lean into solutions instead of surrendering, you're laying a brick in the future you want. Every time you resist excuses and keep searching, you're adding structure to that future. And every time you persist when others stop, you're building something that will eventually look inevitable to everyone else. That's how futures are built, through systematic curiosity applied relentlessly. Here's the reality. The problems that scare you most right now, the ones you've maybe avoided for years, are probably the ones most ready to yield to this approach. The challenges you think are permanent are the ones most vulnerable to your persistence. The relationships you think are beyond repair, the health issue you think can't improve, the financial ceiling you think you can't break, all of those are puzzles waiting for you to apply the reflex. And when you do, when you stop seeing them as obstacles and start seeing them as solvable, the trajectory of your life bends. It doesn't bend overnight. Rockets don't reach orbit in 1 second. They accelerate, gradually, with every ounce of thrust. Your future works the same way. Every act of curiosity is thrust. Every experiment is thrust. Every refusal to quit is thrust. Eventually, momentum builds, gravity weakens, and you break into orbit. That's what building your future looks like. And it doesn't stop with you. One of the most powerful aspects of this quality is that it scales. When you apply it systematically, others notice. They see you tackling problems they thought were impossible. They see you curious when they gave up. They see you building when they resigned, and it inspires them. Curiosity is contagious. Persistence spreads. When you embody this reflex, you give permission for others to rediscover it in themselves. Jennifer did that in her community. The young woman with the icy sidewalks did it for her neighborhood. Innovators in every domain do it for the people around them. You can do it too. Your future doesn't just change your life, it ripples outward. It reshapes the possibilities for everyone connected to you. That's how movements start, that's how societies change, that's how humanity progresses. And here's the final point I want you to hear clearly. The most important thing about you is not something you need to acquire. It's not a skill you don't yet have, not a degree you haven't earned, not a talent you were born without. The most important thing about you is something you already possess, the rare quality of solution-oriented curiosity. You might not have been using it fully. You might not have been applying it everywhere. You might not have recognized how valuable it is, but it's there. It's yours, and it's enough to change everything. The only question is whether you'll choose to recognize it and use it deliberately. Most people never will. They'll live futures handed to them, futures designed by fear, by habit, by inertia. But you don't have to. You can build. You can take the rarest quality you have and apply it until your entire life looks different. So let me leave you with this. What would change if you stopped treating your challenges as permanent and started treating them as puzzles? What would change if you applied this reflex not just sometimes but everywhere? What would change if you recognized that the future isn't a destination waiting for you, but a structure you build every day with your choices? The answer is everything. Everything would change. And the only thing standing between you and that future is whether you choose to act on the quality you already have. You don't need permission. You don't need luck. You don't need to be anyone else. You just need to use the reflex you already own. Do that, and the future you build will be unrecognizable compared to the one you were told to expect. Do that, and you won't just live differently. You'll help humanity live differently. That's the power of the rare quality. That's the power of you.